From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI Podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Welcome Art and welcome Mark. Looking forward to our conversation today about problem solving, 4 types of problems, as Art articulated in his book published in Art, 2019, 2018, and sort of its relationship to lean management systems, but also we're going to get into some, I think, interesting kind of exploration of where problem solving is going to head. So Art, to maybe get us started. So again, welcome. Thanks for doing this. And maybe to get us started, there will be some folks unfamiliar with the 4 types of problems framework. So perhaps you could just give us an overview of that and maybe even give us some background, kind of, what led you to develop that framework that led to a book. And let's just kind of get some background laid out there for the listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to this. So it's a interesting topic, I think, problem solving in its various flavors and how it relates to lean thinking, Toyota production system, because, at a simplistic view, people think 5 whys or problem solving and see what I call one side of the dice. I don't have my play toy here with I think the cats ran off with it and turned it into a play toy, but you look at one side of the die and you see 1, I see 6. But there's also a 3 and a 4 and a 2 and a 5. And TPS, lean thinking, is very much like that. There's like 6 aspects to it. What are you looking at the moment? Because the 4 types of problems does tie into like daily management system, hoshin, and systems and things like that. But for the beginner, that's hard to understand, right? That there's this complicated dance we're playing of how to teach beginners how to do things by steps, but at the expert level, or people who worked in Toyota and kind of experience this firsthand, you understand how the systems interconnect. And painting that picture is complicated. And the book came about because, again, years ago, I wrote A3 Thinking, and our friend John Shook, simultaneously was working on Managing to Learn. Okay, and it's the same topic, but written in different ways. Okay, complementary, very complementary. I'd recommend, if people are interested in the topic, look at those. But immediately after publishing it, I lamented, because you see people posting A3s on the wall, right? Just like all lean wallpaper, things like that. Or thinking that every problem's got to be an A3. And for every amount of good it did, there was also a little bit of, harm's not the right word, but negative aspects to it, because the context wasn't complete. And after we wrote that, I'd written this other book called Toyota Kaizen Methods. I kind of wanted to document the true history behind Toyota and the way Kaizen was different from, type 2 problem solving, gap-based thinking. And that was okay too, but immediately why not, we got to write the whole frame for problem solving better. And then frankly, there's another frame which involves the daily management, the hoshin, and the problem solving together. But I didn't want to tackle that whole thing. So I thought, okay, to sort out problems and kind of represent more a truer TPS look. So the lean thinkers might not agree with me that didn't work at Toyota, but I think Mark or John or other Toyota people that I've talked to, well, in fact, every Toyota person I've asked, agreed with, said, yeah, absolutely, that 4 types framework is very valuable and very accurate, because it displays the very good type 1 problem solving, which is often just responding to and-on triggers and solving things in 60, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, mostly verbally with small documentation. And it's fantastic. It's not band-aiding. It's not dealing with symptoms. It's excellent problem solving at a basic level. And that's a lot of the Toyota production system. People don't understand that. Level up from there, persistent things that do require time. This month, our scrap rate was persistently too high, or we're off budget, or delivery problems are happening, a true gap to standard. We don't know the root cause. Troubleshooting it won't fix. Deep dive, 5 whys, statistical analysis required. Okay, you got to go after that in a slightly different thinking mode. And then again, beyond that, there's Kaizen, raise the standard, and there's still breakthrough thinking, innovation, new products. And I wanted to just try and have this pyramid, or we had this 4 box that shows there's a lot of flavors of problem solving going on inside Toyota, which is, I thought, good for the community to understand. Like there's an entry level thinking about basic steps and one flavor of root cause analysis, but the real world's much more nuanced, situational, and complicated. A long-winded answer there, but there was a lot, that years of thinking that went into that book.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things Mark and I had an experience recently, we were with somebody visiting Toyota as part of this lean leadership learning tour that LEI offers a couple of times a year. And we saw firsthand evidence of that, what you call type 1 or troubleshooting problem solving. It was interesting because one of the people that was with us that I don't think had visited Toyota before, in that conversation we were having with them about type 1, quote unquote, troubleshooting problem, said, oh, right, that's just firefighting. We made the point that no, there's a distinction actually between what Art's called the type 1 troubleshooting problem in terms of having a clear standard that can be detected when we're not meeting it, and engaging in, as you put it, really quality problem solving. So could you maybe speak a little bit to like sort of what would be a distinction in your mind between that type 1 troubleshooting problem solving, which does happen like very quickly in real time, as you said, under 60, 90 seconds, from what you might then call firefighting, which is what, mostly we often see out in the world.
Yeah, obviously there can be bad type 1, just symptoms, dealing with symptoms, and there are good type 1, which Toyota does. And understanding that spectrum is tough to explain to people that didn't work in Toyota, because you say troubleshooting, it does have this negative connotation with it. But the problem was that the term in Japanese actually we use is ijo shochi, is troubleshooting, dealing with abnormalities, abnormality management. And we want a rapid abnormality handling system, which is often triggered off the and on, but not always. It's hard to do well. Let me put it in hospital context. I suffer from diverticulitis and I have kidney stone problems. And once every 2 years or so, I get an affliction. I go, and it's the same pattern. You sit in the waiting room too long, obviously, but they give you a painkiller, antibiotic, and something to treat it. They're not fixing the root cause. All right. Nobody really knows what the root cause of what caused that kidney stone to occur this time. They can give you general ideas. Avoid this, avoid that. Diverticulitis, don't eat nuts. Stay away from these foods. More fiber. But I have a genetic disposition. My father had it too in our intestine, with pockets that's going to catch things to cause the problem. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with good troubleshooting that. It's cheaper from a healthcare point of view. It's not invasive surgery either. They're not cutting me open and putting me in the hospital overnight. There's nothing wrong with treating my diverticulitis with painkillers, antibiotics, and whatever medicine they prescribe that day, even though they didn't fix the root cause, because it recurs. Every couple of years, it recurs genetically, okay? Same thing happens in Toyota. So, I mean, hospitals and healthcare actually have this triage system which separates the types fairly well to some extent. Let's take an oil leak in a factory. What you're right. What happens in a bad factory with the oil leak is it just drips and drips and drips. And then they put these blankets down, or things called pigs, to catch it. And then they put a pan down and something like that, and we ignore it. Maybe we change a valve, but it goes on, and there's more over time. In these old factories, it's like oil leaks everywhere. And you can immediately tell, you can immediately get a feel for the culture just by the number of oil leaks. I'm talking traditional manufacturing, machining kind of shops, okay? Versus Toyota, an oil leak happens, it's like, oh, immediately, okay, why'd it leak? What type of oil? What valve is that coming from? Valve shouldn't leak. So is the valve not installed correctly? Is it the wrong type of valve, or is the seal or the gasket worn out? So it's troubleshooting, but it's a known problem. The thing about type 1, I say it's a known problem with a known solution. But I'm not saying it's easy to fix an oil leak. It takes a very good skilled trades person to just not change the part, but to look deeper and to say, well, oh, the O-ring in that one was damaged. Did we install it wrong? Did it come that way? We don't know, but change the valve, fix the O-ring, oil stops leaking. And you don't have the bad troubleshooting associated with that. You have a machine up and running, speed, quality, right, and no oil leaks. And that's good troubleshooting. Good type 1.
So in a conversation that we had, I guess this was somewhat recently, you made a statement that struck me, which was sort of a claim, I guess, that about, of all the many problems that get detected inside Toyota with the help of TPS, recognizing that, much of what happens inside Toyota manufacturing company is on the shop floor, in operations and production. But the statement that you made, which I think is interesting and be interesting to talk about here for a minute, is that about 90% of all the problems that happen or that are sort of tackled within Toyota are these type 1 troubleshooting problems. And then even then, like most of the remaining 10% of the problems are type 2. We've got 3 types in this framework. And then, of course, outside of that, I might call something like a type 0 firefighting kind of thing that happens. But where we see actual problem solving, 90%, let's say, of problems inside Toyota are type 1. Many of the remaining are type 2. So anyway, maybe you could kind of talk about that statement and what leads you to say that, and then what, in your mind, are the implications for that for organizations that are out there emulating Toyota with TPS or Lean or something like that?
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask Mark. Before I answer, I'm going to ask Mark, okay?
Great.
Just about his perspective on this. He can say higher or lower than 90 and what the strength was. I got my answer, but I'm curious what Mark has to say, because we both worked at Toyota in very different departments, okay?
Yeah, awesome.
Mark, if you could actually, a month in a Tsutsumi, Takaoka, Kamigo big factory, percentage of problems, what are and-on calls, type 1, what percentage are type 2, like on an A3, written down physically at an A3, what would be Kaizen type events? What higher, 90%, higher or lower for type 1?
Thank you for asking me that question. I actually sent Josh some commentary on that this morning about this very topic, so it's maybe
okay to disagree with me, by
maybe
the way.
he forwarded it to you.
I did not. No, I didn't.
No.
I didn't.
Very good.
This is perfectly teed up. Perfectly teed up.
You just put a little more context around that question, Art, than I had.
Yep.
Because what I had heard was 90% of problems in Toyota. You just said in a plant.
Yeah, in a plant.
So, but though I had interpreted your comment as 90% in Toyota, and I actually said to Josh, well, what, close to 80% of team members in Toyota are hourly team members.
All right.
So I would guess the percentage would be even higher if we look at the number that are because the percentage of employees who are doing that, and we want everybody problem solving, percentage of employees doing problem solving is naturally 70-80% of them are hourly people, or team members or team leaders. They're going, and the and-on pull is, and resolving those types of issues is a critical part of the Toyota production system. It's natural that you're going to have a very high percentage. What I said to Josh in my note, though, is that it depends on where you are in Toyota. I mean, I've never directly managed production in Toyota. So honestly, my number was probably flipped. I mean, and most of the people I worked around is salaried staff. I was working more on type 2, type 3, maybe some type 4 problems, very little troubleshooting in my job. So, I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, no, the context matters. Absolutely. Yeah. Where do you work? It's where I'm just trying to get away. I'm glad you said that, because I'm trying to get away from these one size fits all answers, one framework. And like the people who drive me the nuts are the professor crowd writing, it's just the scientific method. That's too abstract to help anybody. There's no situational context. Beginners need steps, rules, and tools to follow. It's an unfortunate reality necessity. I want to get to a system level and expert understanding, but there's a progression. I can put a slide up in a little bit that deals with that. But the context of where you are, what you're doing, absolutely matters on this topic. So it was sort of a red herring, right? I was baiting us with this question.
Yeah.
If you're in a factory, if you're in Kamigo engine, plant, Takaoka, Tsutsumi, it's more than 90%, because every worker, like Mark said, 80% is direct labor, direct labor in production. Pulling that and-on cord 5-10 times a day, mathematically, drives the number of type 1 occurrences, things that got to get resolved in 1, 2, 5, 10 minutes time frame astronomically. So technically, using my stringent definition of type of shop and type of worker, it's higher than 90%. And that what the implications of that is that you have to have if you're a machine intensive or any kind of work intensive shop, that you got to have a strong ability base in the frontline worker, team member, group leader to problem solve. You can't push everything up in an organization to the top of the pyramid. It just doesn't work. And okay, offices, I'll say that, so technically I was in the office, but my job was assisting a lot of troubleshooting and things that then went to type 2, hard type 1 things that got to the type 2 level. But let's take coding. I've been doing a lot of software coding lately, and software engineers, they're debugging constantly. Writing code is an exercise in debugging and solving known problems better and faster. That's type 1. So a software person, though they won't call it troubleshooting, they call it debugging. A huge amount of software work as you compile things and try and get them to deploy properly is fixing known problems and troubleshooting. So again, it depends upon how you define what's a type 1, type 2, type 3 to 4, and very much the nature of the work. But yeah, I was trying to shock you with the number to make people think who are in manufacturing and production, the extent to which Toyota relies upon its frontline team members, team leaders, and group leaders to solve problems and keep things under control.
Hey, can I ask a supplemental question there, Josh? So I think it's because this is people I encounter out in the field who are trying to understand your framework, Art, and that around type 1, often, a lot of questions are like, oh, so then somebody pulls the end on and everybody stops and tries and solves the problem, does a 5 why on the issue. So
Yeah.
maybe you could, for our audience, like clarify. I think that the and-on concept and how all that works is an important part of type 1 problem solving. It'd be great for you to maybe further.
Yeah, it's very hard to explain because we don't pull the and-on cord doesn't mean everybody in the area or factory stops. We hold hands, reflect for a minute and think about in a group team effort, what's the 5 why, and we stay in there in the circle until it's done. I'm being facetious. But it's hard to explain the dynamic nature of, okay, Mark and I both had to do our factory training, okay? And I was on this so-called freshman process that required me to, part of the 45 seconds, 54 seconds, I forget what tack time was to input these starter bolts into the engine as it moved past me on a line. Well, the standardized work was so well thought through that you cannot just use your right hand. There were 4 bolts and do 1, 2, 3, 4 with your right hand. You had to simultaneously pick up 1, 2, simultaneously, boom, boom. You didn't have that extra second to cheat and just use your right-handed. Well, I was back then very right-handed. Today I've done a lot more, dexterity things and then like improved my left-handed ability. But I struggled horribly putting in those starter bolts. And I kept stripping the ones on the left in the beginning, those first few days, because you get them lined in, you think they're lined, and then you got to drive them in farther. I kept stripping it. And every time you strip one, get it cross-threaded. I got it cross-threaded in the hole. You had to pull the and-on cord because the guy next to me, he can't put on his throttle body or the bracket that he was attaching into the 4 bolts that I had put in place. I swear I pulled that thing. It felt like 20 times a day. It was probably 5 or 8. I don't know. But the line keeps going, okay? Supervisor's there. I'm a freshman. They're kind of watching me more closely anyway. And what they're experts as is taking that out. He's got a tool to retap the hole really quickly. And that strip thread problem was fixed before 60 seconds was up. He would then work with the guy at the next station to finish tapping the hole, getting the stud bolt in. Then they'd slap on the bracket and finish their work. And the next guy on the line wouldn't be impacted. So that was like choreographed textbook. I've got my 60 seconds for my station, the 60 seconds in the next station. We were resolving a troubleshooting and on call in 60 to 120 seconds. And the line didn't stop technically because the conveyor line keeps moving in that case. I pulled it. The person after me is impacted, but the line's still moving. He's got to work around the issue temporarily, and the team leader had to come in with his tool and fix the stripped threads. And okay, then hey, Art, it's just the alignment. Remember, double check your alignment. The key point is to thread it the wrong way and then thread it the right way. Go counterclockwise, then go clockwise. And like, yeah, I know, I'm just not very good with my left hand, But I got better even the course of the month. I wasn't having any cross-threaded screws, as the month went on. You can learn dexterity improves. I guess sore, but I improved it. But yeah, it's a misconception that the line stops, everybody huddles around, and there's a big group meeting, and nothing goes forward until we've got to the root cause of this problem. Certain problems are known problems, known solutions. They have a way to deal with it in a good troubleshooting fashion. The line didn't even stop, kept rolling.
So in those, I guess in those numbers that we were talking about earlier, the 90% or greater than 90%, if we're talking about a production environment,
Yeah.
Many of the instances that make up that percentage would be along the lines of what you just described.
Yeah, there's an SOP for troubleshooting. The best Toyota facilities don't just have standardized work. They have work standards and techniques, the troubleshooting steps the known problems, that the 5 most common operator mistakes are this, and there's a way to troubleshoot those, or machine jamming or something like that. We know how to troubleshoot that issue. We know how to reset and do things on the fly really quickly. So there's standardized work for your job, but then there's work standards or technical standards for how to debug or troubleshoot the machine really quickly, fix the quality glitch effectively. And some are fixed in station, others are tagged and go to the end of the line and get repaired. There's this very complicated triage of steps that goes on. It's nuanced, and that's the hard part, to explain the systemic things and the nuances behind all of this.
Sure. Okay, well, so one of the things that we talked about in preparation for this conversation, so you made this contribution some number of years ago now with the 4 types of problems framework. Mm-hmm. LEI published that book again back in the late 2010s. Over the last couple of years, kind of a focus for us has been on various aspects of the management system. We've alluded to those already in this conversation. The daily management system for kind of running the business or running the operation in the short term. Hoshin kanri. So last year we published a book, Daily Management to Execute Strategy, and then just last year we published Mark's book, Managing on Purpose, about hoshin kanri. And we thought that there would be value in kind of mapping the 4 types of problems framework onto the management system that we see at companies like Toyota. Mm-hmm. So maybe we could kind of walk through that. And, for anyone listening, maybe help provide some kind of clarity around how that 4 types framework kind of maps onto a lean management system, let's call it, inclusive of daily management, hoshin kanri. You want to say something before we walk through?
This is the next step that, Mark moved the needle with, hoshin kanri and stuff, 4 types, but there's still this daily management and interplay between the types. And I don't have a good analogy, but it's like a Rubik's Cube, right?
Yeah.
You scramble the Rubik's Cube, but there's a way to unscramble it and get everything lined up and working properly. And that's hard to explain.
Well, like I said, Mark and I just 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago, we're with a sampling, let's say, of people from the lean community, from various businesses. We were touring various, lean pursuing organizations, including Toyota's factory in Kentucky, Georgetown, Kentucky. And we were both struck by the number of questions that people had. Specifically, of course, as we're visiting Toyota, as we're visiting GE Appliances, we're seeing, we're hearing a lot about how the system makes problems visible, how the system is organizing people in response to those problems, and then kind of the methods that people are deploying to tackle those problems. We're hearing a lot about that.
Yeah.
But we were both struck by how many questions people had with regard to kind of how that organization of problem solving works. And of course, we think about that in terms of the management system in many ways. So that I think, to your point, there's a lot of interest, uncertainty. A lot of people have questions about this. So we're pretty excited to have this conversation today and to share this. So, I guess let's kind of walk through it. I'll say step by step or type by type.
Okay, let's do that. But at the end of every one, I want to throw the ball to Mark because he can
Great.
say it more from an office point of view. And I'm gonna, because somebody, I feel like I have to play the role of the TPS guy from the shop floor. And it's not that I want to, but it's like if I don't, the real old school TPS is not going to come across.
Great.
I will contradict myself. We can get off this, and I'll freely say that like 80% of my work was type 2 and type 3.
Yeah.
But that's not true for Kamigo Engine Plant, which was, the model factory for Toyota in 65 through a long time, and Taiichi Ohno founding plant manager stuff. So I feel like if we don't understand the roots, we can lose our bearing, our North Star sometimes.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I think a lot of the people that we get to interact with are also coming out of those like office environments and are interested to learn about type 2 and 3, but they don't necessarily have the good type 1 in place to benefit from. And so a lot of what they are approaching as a type 2 or type 3 is too late and almost being tackled inappropriately because of the lack of a good protection system for good type 1.
Okay, so I'll give you my type 1 daily management hoshin thing, and we'll throw it to Mark to do more of the office. So we can potentially we're looking at the same cube, but I'm going to look at it from 1 and he's going to look at it from 6, even though it's the same damn cube. Okay, dice.
Great.
So the shop floor type 1 is the andon calls and the immediate reaction abnormalities to problems, which takes a lot of skill set in the workforce. Okay, but that was a strategy. You can say that was a hoshin in and of itself, to develop the capability in team leaders to do job instruction, standardized work, Kaizen, troubleshooting, job relations, small improvements. That in and of itself was a hoshin, okay, in the early 1950s to make that system start to work on the shop floor. Now, the way I'd say that works with a daily management system is, yes, you do have huddles, okay, pre-shift, not always end of shift, but always pre-shift. You're going to have this huddle and you go through the metrics real quick, safety things real quick, attendance real quick, and discuss problems that were within the team's control, not engineering things per se, but the group leader will communicate, okay, like the top five things we carried over from yesterday are X, Y, and Z. 2 of them remain. We're still dealing with, this irregular quality problem out of that machine for some reason, or we're seeing a lot of faults on this machine for some reason. So be aware of that. Engineers may come down, take a look at that, and an engineer might be in the meeting, things like that. But the daily management system has a language of problem solving in it that I call the 4 C's. And I use the 4 C's because if you look at a lot of the A4 documents, not the A3s, you look at the A4 documents in Toyota, it's literally 4 quadrants of stating the concern or defect contents, cause, get to 5Y, countermeasures at the recurrence prevention stage, and then just asking how you check results, okay, in the next cycle, in the next hour, in the next day. It's ingraining that 4C mindset on the shop floor, okay? And then when I say it's like that matters because you're not going to make your monthly numbers. No group, no team or area is going to make its weekly or monthly numbers unless you solve a lot of those small problems quickly. If you don't, you let everything fester, then you get to the end of the month and, well, we're 10% off on productivity, 15% too much downtime, cost is off by 5% because of all that overtime we had to run and stuff like that. But a lot of the management system, the building block, the base of the pyramid is the ability of the frontline workers, team leaders, and group leaders to, in their daily management system, effectively combat, troubleshoot, and solve problems. And they got a goal. A hoshin gives them a goal. Your cost per unit, your scrap rate, all that stuff is trickled down, like Mark can articulate from his books and point of view better than I can, I think. But every team in Toyota's got a goal cascaded up and down. It's not just top down, okay?
Yep.
To them, something to work on. And that, I think that is one of the most unique things about Toyota, the strength and the involvement of the front line. And Mark can agree, disagree, and explain how it slightly differs in the office.
So I don't know if my opinion differs, or I guess my experience differs a little bit.
Yeah.
But I spent 10 years at TSSC. So I was on the shop floor. I didn't spend most of that time was not in Toyota plants.
Yeah.
And but where I saw the gap in what I knew Toyota to be and what I saw in that experience with suppliers was, and even to this day, I would say where organizations struggle related to what we're talking about, type 1, type 2, and daily management, is just the capability to know, like, have you even delivered the output you expected to deliver for the day? I mean, one of the primary first steps in when I was working with Toyota Supplier Support Center to help suppliers implement TPS. I mean, you had suppliers, but they didn't know. Did they complete what they were supposed to complete today or not? And that has an impact up and down the organization, not just from the business point of view, but from team members' point of view. Like they come to work and don't know what they're expected to actually accomplish that day. So that was the first step in any kind of any work we did was get, even on a flip chart, start to track what are you making hourly, and are you meeting the customer requirement, expected customer requirement on hour by hour. So production analysis board. And to me, that is the start, and then start to review that regularly. And that to me is this birth what a daily management system can be. Now, that's different from speaking to, which I mean, I think that's still a pretty big problem in most organizations, not knowing, are you ahead or behind for the day? Or did you make good quality product, and how good is that today? Or by the hour even. So that's very different from living in the Toyota system, which through decades of maturity has a very sophisticated, what you were speaking to a little bit, Art, that has developed a very sophisticated system that not only do we know with very much granularity, minute to minute, hour to hour, how we're performing on our production line, or oftentimes in other areas of the business as well, but we have a mechanism at a daily level to know how we're doing versus some of those prime key performance indicators that we track as an organization, like productivity and output and cost and quality, but also on a bigger scale, what I talk about in my book, Hoshin Kanri, and how we're engaging up and down the organization to ensure that longer term, the company is achieving its objectives based on the competitiveness of the market, and we're engaging people up and down the organization to play a part in that.
So can you guys talk a little bit about, I think in particular in this, while our focus is still on type 1 relative to kind of daily management, quote unquote daily management, I heard both of you talk about, in the context of troubleshooting, type 1 problem solving in daily management. I've heard both of you talk about hourly and even minute by minute. And yet we call it daily, it gets called daily management, but hourly is not daily. By minute is not daily. Could you guys just kind of elaborate a little bit on that, and how you see the relationship of this kind of hourly management and even minute by minute management or tact management as also part of that really robust, effective daily, quote unquote, daily management system? Because I think there's some confusion kind of out there around that too.
Yeah, I think the concept, and Mark nailed it perfectly, is understanding plan versus actual for your job. Okay, at the individual level, team level, site level. And Toyota is a high volume, medium variation case. Okay, it's a middle case. There are people that make millions, more units than a car factory. But my wife is the opposite, making satellites, and I don't even know, what the rate is. 2 years to make a satellite, 1 year, I don't know what the takt time on satellite is.
Yeah.
But plan versus actual varies tremendously. Knowledge work versus production work, high pace versus low pace type of work. This is where, again, This is where the details and the nuances matter. And I get mad at the abstract. Just do science. Okay, no, I'm sorry. That doesn't help. We need a step for knowledge work, slow moving knowledge work, fast paced knowledge work, high paced, super high paced pace. A billion Gillette razors were made. The tack time is 0.013 or something like that. You can't operate at 0.013 thinking speed one at a time. Doesn't work that way. Toyota is this nice sweet spot of, tack times are 40 to 60 seconds, something like that. And volumes are like 500 per shift, which it's easier for the human to grasp that kind of number too. But the key point is at the individual level, team level, section, company level, plan versus actual, and did you do it? Because that's the starting for problem solving. And you'll find out if you go down by hour, you can start by day, then by shift, take it down by hour. Toyota's doing it cycle by cycle. How many problems can you surface? The problem is you surface too many, you're overwhelmed. You can't handle them. You can't handle 1,000 and-on calls like Toyota can. But on the flip side, if you do zero problem solving during the day of plan versus actual, like purchasing, let's go administrator for a second. How many purchase orders are you supposed to write today? They're troubleshooting systems, problems all the time. Like I invoice my clients, and whenever they change their system, there's always glitches and problems and information that needs to be updated. Doesn't matter. Stanford Medical, Sandia National Laboratories, two of the smartest places on the planet. All right. Type 1 problems stop me from invoicing and getting reimbursed. The standard was 60 days. One took 90, one took 6 months. Okay. They're troubleshooting in the background. I'm sorry. That's not good type 2 problem solving. That's an office in the background. Somebody's troubleshooting a database. Somebody's troubleshooting the cleanup. Everybody's got these dirty little type 1s that we don't really want to talk about, but they're dealing with throughout the day. But the concept that Mark is hitting, I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, plan versus actual, can you understand that at the individual level, team level, group level, section level? And if you don't keep score, it's not fulfilling. If you don't keep score in a football game, it's not interesting. Life, sports, everything's more interesting if you can compare yourself, plan versus actual, and see how it's doing.
Yeah, I can maybe, that was great, Art. I can maybe add a couple words to that, but I work a fair amount in the construction industry. And it's an interesting
flow movement. Yeah.
So in some ways and Josh is from there too, but it's a fairly it's one of the more unstable industries, I would say, for the kind of the nature of the industry. But in other ways, this whole thing of minute by minute and daily you're talking about is important in that industry. And it's reflected in that industry. If that industry is still, if you're building a building, let's just say call it an office building, the people building that building are going to be individual trades. The industry is still organized by trades. So you got your cement guy, you got your steel guy, you got your carpenter is going to put in the drywall. They're all organized by trades. And generally speaking, most of that industry, people still learn through their trade. They get apprenticed to a great extent. So if you're in the field, there's still the foreman is in charge of the trade and the work for that day. And to a great extent, even though they don't have anywhere near the type of system like Toyota has that's set up with Andon, they do know that whether their team's making what they're supposed to make for the day, because they're most of those foremen have honestly, they're foremen because they have decades of hands-on experience doing the work. And so it's a pretty good example, I think, of the in the moment. Now, for better or worse, many things happen in construction. So they're not able to actually to manage according to the way they want to manage. And that's where, and this is another area where I think construction also struggles, but on a daily basis, we want to know, okay, on the overall project, this building is supposed to be built in the next year. So today, did we complete what we're supposed to complete? And that is an area that, again, construction does struggle with a little bit, but it's an important part of their work because, if you're the company that Josh and I have worked a fair amount with, build for big buildings. They build stadiums, for example, football stadiums. Mm. And you got to have a football stadium done on time, man, or the football team can't play. These are professional football stadiums. So things have to get done on time. They're not so great at breaking all that down day to day, but that for them, it is important on it that they keep track of really like some metrics, like you were talking to, Art, that over the course of time, kind of tell the success of the project. Not only, I mean, of course, we want to know are things getting done on time, but of course, you want to know that it's done safely. Safety is very important. You want to know that it's done with good quality. And so tracking that type of progress of the workplace over time is a great, and those things happen daily. So it's a great way to utilize daily management to measure, like you were talking about, or have a scorecard so you can see like, okay, did we complete? We were supposed to complete yesterday. And what progress are we improving? Those type of things.
Yeah.
I know, and I mean, I know, you've seen this a lot more than I have, Mark, for sure. But some of the better run job sites will see that kind of daily monitoring. Even then, it seems to be quite rare where that kind of daily, or even better when possible, hourly monitoring results in type 1 troubleshooting problem solving. That's often, even when that monitoring is happening, that's often not. And so the monitoring saying we're behind, and it often results more in just adjustments to the plan, like resetting the target, than actually engaging in some kind of some form, type 1 or 2, which we'll get to here in a second, but problem solving.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to say there can be good and bad versions of that too, because sometimes, I'm going to say in the case of construction, I do have a friend who is like a lean director at a construction firm. I won't embarrass him, but there's a weather snafus, there's supply chain snafus, there's several things. And the daily huddle, the daily management system, the daily huddle is to talk about plan B. You got to go to plan B sometimes. Circumstances dictate that. It's just with the people and resources, material and skills available today, here's what I can do. And we'll catch up on later in the week because of that. And I don't, if that is well scheduled and you get things done on Friday and catch up, it's good. If it's like, oh shoot, we can't do anything today because the supplier didn't deliver, and you sit around and you waste the day, that's bad type 1 troubleshooting. That's bad daily management. So daily management, even type 1, that's why I say do not trivialize type 1, depending on the circumstance, because in the construction case, like, okay, what is our legitimate workaround to still be on time at the end of the week and the end of the month, given the hiccups we just experienced in staffing, weather, supplier, delivery, materials, et cetera, inspectors being late. That's an intellectual game they got to play to think about optimize the solutions, optimize the resources we have to come up with the best solutions possible. That's not bad troubleshooting. I mean, you can band-aid it and screw it up, but there's very good optimization thinking behind that too.
I think an aspect of construction that's very similar to Toyota that I think is strong is that whole like Toyota's concept of the team leader and how they know the job. They can support when a andon gets pulled because they know the work actually better than a team member. You gave your example, Art. That's pretty true in construction too. The foremen know the work they've done. They're a foreman because they've done that work. So when there are issues that where the team member struggles, I mean, I frequently see. I mean, the foremen are very hands-on in helping. The issue is in many cases just because of the nature of the construction industry, there's not a really good, robust daily management system to govern all that work. And I think that's what you're speaking to, Josh.
Yeah.
And so it's not clear a lot of times. What are you supposed to really get done today? And if you don't, there's this kind of acceptance that we can push things back
or add additional resources tomorrow or something like that.
If pushing out or adding resources, then I will say it's bad type 1, it's bad troubleshooting.
That's
right. How do I mitigate in the circumstances? How do we mitigate and work around this and still achieve our goals? Quality, cost, delivery, not over cost, not pushing out the timeline.
That's right. And not just being critical. I mean, that is an extremely challenging industry. Like you said, there's so many things beyond their control. And that's, built certain defense mechanisms, habits that can run kind of contrary to that good
And the
type
slower the
one.
pace, I like to say, the harder to surface the problem sometimes.
Sure.
The nice thing about, okay, the car coming down line every 60 seconds, I can count that, but it's the slower and less visible the work, the harder it is to see the problems or surface it sometimes. So
Yeah.
in those cases, you have to be even more careful about how you set up your daily management system to address what Mark was saying about plan versus actual. What is plan versus actual, this environment, and what's the time span we're going to compare at what level, what metric?
Yeah. All right. So that was great. Thank you. And I think, in large part goes to sort of underscore the 90% plus claim earlier.
I was being provocative for a reason.
I know, but I think
wind people up.
What we all got into there, and even the time we just spent talking about type 1 problem solving inside daily management, really speaks to how much value there is in building that capability organizationally, and how often it's just missing, and the value that the businesses could get from really investing in creating the conditions and the capability for good type 1 problem solving in high quantity within a daily management system, let's say. So kind of moving down the line, so to speak, from type 1 and its relationship to daily management. Art, could you talk a little bit then about for the problems that type 1 kind of one by one 4 C's problem solving is kind of insufficient for?
Yeah.
We then get into type 2, and could you talk about sort of type 2's relationship to daily management? So how does it kind of function and work inside a good daily management system in your experience at Toyota? Let's start maybe there.
Okay. So there's a variety of things that can lead to a type 2. I call triggers. A trigger conceptually could be the end of the month. You've missed your scrap, your cost, quality delivery, your hoshin targets that you were given as a team. There's a gap. You can't explain it. It requires extra manpower hours to dig into and find out why that happened. So there's a flavor of type 2s that arise at the end of the weekend of the month because you've missed your goals and you can't say why. Find it out. That's not acceptable in Toyota. Okay. A lot of companies just explain it away. I missed it. It's the issues. No, the Toyota this time is go explain your gap, break down your gap, analyze the causes, and talk about your countermeasures tomorrow, by the way. Okay. Not going home early today. So there's that flavor. Then there's the other kind, what I call the major breakdown flavor. I'm trying to just explain the extremes, and then we can worry about the middle cases. The extremes is suddenly something catastrophically goes wrong. Bam. And there's versions of this problem because it's not one problem, but I call it the induction hardening machine problem, which the machine suddenly failed one day, catastrophic downtime. You can't troubleshoot that. We didn't even have the technical knowledge at the time in-house to diagnose what the real problem was. So we were forced into a type 2 emergency problem solving system in Kentucky. First time we set up a machining line. First time we set up a crankshaft line in America. And we're 6 months into the launch. There is no workaround for induction hardening. You don't rub your hands really hard and light a fire and troubleshoot an induction hardening machine that's gone down. There is no workaround. The expensive solution is to air freight crankshafts in from Japan, which is stupendously expensive. Okay. So we were given like if you don't solve this in 72 hours, air freight begins. So the weekend, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday was in the plant. An expert was literally flying over while this happened from Japan. Yep. And it wound up, it's something I can explain with a 5 why, but it took 72 hours to dig into, and it did result in an A3. Okay. And the ladder goes like this. We were experiencing coil touch faults. If the induction hardening coil goes around the part, well, it rotates. For the people who are just listening, you can't see what I'm doing with my fingers, but a coil is putting heat into the part, hardening it. All right. And then you quench the part in water. Well, the coil, if it overexpands, it touches the part by design. It's a Jidoka condition, abnormality. The machine, not the operator, the machine signals the defect. And we'd had this steady increase in coil touch faults. It was documented. It was talked about for a week, 2 weeks. And people were trying to troubleshoot it at the local level, doing their best. We didn't have the technical expertise at that point in time to really understand what was lurking behind the scenes. Coil touch faults up, escalated it, complained, tried everything. And one day, literally, the machine just kaboom, exaggerating here, blows up, won't run. Well, what had happened, the reason why the coil was expanding was because there's also cooling water going through the coil. You heat, but you're also putting cooling water through it. The cooling water flow had gotten smaller and smaller and smaller insufficient flow through the pipe of the cooling water. Reason why there's insufficient cooling water supply was because there was calcium mineral buildup in the water supply pipes to the induction hardening coil. The reason why was, again, Kentucky's water source into the plant was 10 times harder than Japan. Japan's a volcano-based island nation. The water is very soft and very pure from the ground. Kentucky's built on limestone. And as silly as it sounds, we did not have a global spec back then to think about the water quality through certain types of equipment. Paint department, some areas did. Machining did not, because it was not considered a critical parameter. It had never been a problem before. So our root cause was, okay, there's no water softener device on the machine. And the pipes literally that should have been 2 inches in diameter were about under an inch in diameter, choked, which was the causing of the overheating. The coils all exploded. The machine went down. So, okay, multiple levels. This is type 2. A hidden problem. Can't see it. Troubleshooting failed every step of the way. We had a standard in production we were not hitting. And we also had a technical standard which failed in the design and commissioning of the equipment that wasn't included. And it was, again, an emergency workaround was built, replacing the pipes, the temporary countermeasure, replacing the pipes. The experts came over, realized what we had done, and the manufacturer sent us some updated parts and things to get us running. There was one air freight shipment, I think. It was too close to cut it. They did air freight one shipment of crankshafts over from Japan. But we were up and running in 3, 4, 5 days just fine after the pipes had been replaced. We put low water flow detection. We missed the Jidoka element of low water flow. I don't know why that was missed. So we added that. Reverse osmosis water softening device was installed at the next major shutdown because that took days. There was one kind of Easter or something was coming up. We did it then, and and we updated the global standards so nobody else in machining, induction hardening would ever have this problem again. That's an example of what I call an individual organizational type 2, where Toyota resolved it. The problem never happened again. That style of problem never happened again, Toyota overseas, that from what I'm aware. We solved it at the local level and the institutional level.
Yeah, that's helpful distinction between the sort of the catastrophic event that, the 4 C's, a troubleshooting approach would just be insufficient for, versus these things that where your daily management system is picking up on this kind of recurring issue that is just sort of puzzling, and then helping to organize who is needed to sort of dig into that with, again, an approach to problem solving that's beyond the 4 C's, that really is getting into that root cause analysis to dig into that sort of recurring issue, that gap from standard. Mark, then do you want to, is there, I guess, kind of follow our pattern here from production environments, operating environments into other environments, administrative environments, knowledge work environments? Anything maybe to add there to this sort of relationship between type 2 problem solving and management systems, maybe daily management specifically, but in different environments?
I think maybe just to add, not a lot to add. Art, that was a great example. I mean, I think the most common refrain I hear, and I often hear it in the context of sharing your framework, Art, is, well, we don't have a standard.
Totally.
And so it almost is like an excuse. And I've heard this is pretty across, including manufacturing, across many industries. We don't have a standard. So then what do you do when you have a standard? But the reality, so I got some great advice a long time ago from a gentleman who was the head of Toyota North America, Mr. Minora, former disciple of Ono, worked for Ono. But I I don't even remember the point of discussion we were talking about at the time. But his quote from him that I remember distinctly was, "There's always a de facto standard." And I think that's what there's a way things are done. So start from that point of view. And I think if you and what you realize when you start to investigate is there usually is some de facto standard. It's a methodology that's followed in the organization to complete a task.
Yeah.
So just writing that down for people then gives you a chance to then think about, okay, so are we performing to that? Maybe the other component of that is, you may not have full standards, but organizations generally, I think in most industries, measure things. And so are you meeting your expected objectives, goals for today, for this week, for this month? And if not, why not? And I mean, that can be used as a frame of reference for type 2 problem solving too, I think.
Great.
Yeah, you're right. There's always a defect. It may not be documented, but it's not the opposite of standardized would be total chaos. And people like to say it's chaos. It ain't chaos. Chaos meaning literally everybody does it 100% differently every way, every time. It's not true. We're more standardized than we realize. The problem is the standard is not clear, documented, and we have a hard time comparing against that invisible de facto standard, I think.
Another thing I hear people struggling with is just, I guess, even in the case where there is something de facto that you might help them recognize and appreciate, people struggling in the absence of a documented, clear, established standard, getting that established and documented. I often hear is like a hang up, like there's a real like a hesitancy to kind of just say, well, my best guess as to what the standard should be is X. What maybe advice would you give to people who, would say there's not a clear standard, maybe could come to recognize that there's something approximating a de facto standard, but get kind of caught or stuck in, well, I don't know how to determine the standard. Is there some advice that you would give to help somebody just kind of get past that quickly so they can get into the active monitoring relative to that and get into some problem solving activity?
So Toyota had this problem in the early 1950s, just so long ago, the generations are gone that nobody knows how to talk about it. Funny that the institutional knowledge of what actually happened in the early 50s, late 50s, 60s is lost. But the work, they went through job instruction training for that purpose as a sort of baseline, like document the steps, key points, and reasons why. Competing ways between, so who's your lead operator? Start there. Okay, start there. Whoever the lead or best recognized person is. Major steps, key points, reasons why. No timing, okay? No time studies. Just agree upon what the steps and key points, reasons why are for safety and quality reasons. That's a hell of a good way to start, okay? I don't know how else you would start if you can't start there. A lot of people just say, I want to have pictures, I want to have a video. Okay, I don't know how that works. I'm not saying it can't be done. I haven't seen that ever historically done well and stick. So there's a stage that at least I'll be the TPS purist in the room from the factory shop floor perspective, which was where it started. Document the major steps, key points, reasons why. Do it safely, reliably, conscientiously. And that gets you like 80 or 90% of the way there. After that, Toyota did add on, well, now let's time study it.
Yeah.
Now let's write true work standards with visual graphics. Now let's add level beyond that to tack time and elemental times and get to that level where you can see what the pace for the job should be. And then, okay, now let's start challenging workers to do it in less time or more efficiently, Kaizen, a step beyond that. So it's not the 4 types of problems, but there is sort of a 4-step pattern, which Toyota did in the 50s and 60s of job instruction training, followed by better, more visual work standards, followed by standardized work, followed by the ability to then do Kaizen onto the standard. And, I'm not saying that was easy. I'm not going to lie and say that was easy or fast.
Yeah, sure, sure.
We can do better, smarter today with the benefit of hindsight, but there is no snap your fingers, sprinkle magic dust, have that automatically occur.
Hey, Josh, let me give you another example
Great.
that I think speaks a little bit to, and maybe empathizes a bit with the people that say we struggle to make a standard. I've recently been working with the healthcare system, and they a major part of their business model, or I mean, just getting business is through a function called patient access. And patient access is actually a fairly large function of the hospital system, and that is basically the people when you call to make an appointment, to inquire about talking to a doctor, you have to go through patient access. And so it's pretty much like a call center. So it's staffed with those type of people. Now this patient access group has a fairly I would say knowledge of, I mean, it's a little bit more than just kind of potentially routing you to somebody. I mean, they have to have fairly good knowledge of the types of questions patients might ask and who to route questions based on those questions that patients might ask when they call. But one of the big problems that exists in their system is that different doctors have different standards for how they'll connect with patients or how they do scheduling, and consequently, it makes it very difficult for the people who are receiving receiving calls from the customer to easily track that person to get help. And so I guess I would say that sometimes and those are frontline staff. This is like we're talking here about standards for frontline staff. These are the people who are receiving calls are frontline staff, but it's very difficult to define standards for those people without impacting across the organization on standards for how doctors allow scheduling, or standards for how different care units in the hospital allow scheduling. So it's actually an area to talk about. That's where an area where frontline work is in this particular health system is connecting with hoshin. I mean, it's almost become a corporate objective now to make that better, because it's not only does it impact customer, direct, how customers feel if you're being shuttled between different phone calls and you're not getting a good answer, but it also is impacting the profitability and the cost of the hospital, because they lose patients that way. I mean, people give up on the health system and they go somewhere else.
Oh, that's a great example. Okay, so kind of continuing our exploration here, Art, even what you just laid out, that was a nice kind of 4-sequence process. Not easy, as you said, but you sort of ended in that 4-step sequence with Kaizen, with elevating the standard, elevating performance. So could we kind of go there next? So we've taken a look at type 1, type 2, its relationship with daily management, even now with Mark, your example, potential connection to hoshin. But let's go to type 3 next, where we've got target condition that someone has proactively kind of proposed or determined, and the kind of problem solving that we're going to deploy therein to really raise the standard.
Okay. So type 3, again, gets tons of attention, Kaizen, target state, whatever you want to call it. In some ways, we default towards that, thinking it's going to solve problems of 1 and 2, and I'm going to say it doesn't. That's part of the problem I observe, healthcare, construction, shop floor, that doing type 3 alone without a base of 1 and 2 usually doesn't stick. It backslides. You do something really great, well, there's energy and attention, and it tends to backslide, the type 3s. because there's not the system of daily management and hoshin and standards in place to do type 3 effectively. And so, like I said, there's flavors of type 3, just like there's flavors of type 2, there's flavors of type 3. It's like my 4 types of framework actually has 16. I'm just not ready to share it, okay? Let's talk about the flavors of type 3.
Sounds like you've got a lot of books to write, Art.
I was hoping Mark's going to write the next one. Now, 4 types of problems, hoshin, daily management, leadership. Just connect those 4 dots, one book. Easy.
Yeah.
Just somebody just do it. All right. So Kaizen, there is like opportunistic, minute by minute, no Kaizen. And it happens in Japan historically by the suggestion system. You're in the office, you're in the shop floor, you got a better idea. We used to spend these expensive circuit boards. If motor goes failure, CNC machine, circuit boards, $1,000 repair. And there's like a capacitor or diode that failed, a 10-cent item. And then people in our spare parts crib came up with the idea of like, let's get the ability to diagnostically scan the board and figure out if at our level, if we can figure out it's something we can repair. And they did. They found out that on certain types of circuit board failures, it's a fairly easy thing to troubleshoot, and we would get those fixed for $10 instead of $1,000, new replacement item. That's a great idea. What did it come off a type 3 or anything? No, it was a creative insight that an employee had. I had one in Toyota, like picking gaskets was difficult. So I talked with the team leader, and by the end of the month before I left, they had this little suction device that picked up the gasket, so I could pull off one at a time. It lifted the gasket. Instead of a stack of gaskets, it would lift one up for me. I would take it and put it on underneath the throttle body or whatever I was assembling. They did that in a month, and it was a great, cool little suggestion Kaizen device built. Saved a second, 2 seconds, I don't know. So there's these like little Kaizens that can happen because the culture has been built to enable and enable and foster that. There's kind of a monthly Kaizen cadence too. And this is how intricate Toyota is in Japan. I'm talking the old days, 10 plants, and they're about majority within 10 kilometers of each other. Tack time changes, and we'd move bodies between Kamigo engine plant and Shimoyama, the 2 big engine plants. If our engines were down, theirs might be up, and vice versa. There's temporary staff. People could be put into indirect temporarily, but there was a system orchestrated by HR for assembly lines, for example, to move people between plants that were only a few miles apart. So your tack time changed monthly back then, okay? And you had about 10 days notice that this is probably if your tack time was changing or not, and how much, how many people you were adding or losing. And for the assembly line, the machine shop layout doesn't change, but the assembly line, certain areas might change. The parts presentation, the length might change because of that 10% change in tack time, whatever the number was. Adding people. And you had a quick period where the group leader, team leader, and the people being affected would, like on a whiteboard, draw the stack chart and figure out how to reallocate work. So there was not a Kaizen event, but there were hours dedicated to Kaizen during the work week, after work, before work, sometimes to figure out with a better line balance for the new tack time, where we're going to put the new person or extra 2 bodies we're getting, because the tack time got faster, and the work had to be reallocated. So there's sort of a monthly Kaizen flavor that goes. And then there's like more of the hoshin kind of Kaizen, like your budget's been cut. Like you're expected to be 7% better. Whatever the number, 3, 5, 7. Cost, quality, delivery. You're going to be given some number through the hoshin process that Mark described so well, and you have to be thinking that the owner of the area, the group leader, the assistant manager, figuring out, okay, the enablers for me systemically do that are X, Y, and Z. I need to involve engineering and get these machine cycle times faster. So in the background, Art Smalley is being called to say that cycle time of that machine, that the firm in place gasket, the robot that delivers that, it's at 27 seconds. We need to get down to 22. Can we with quality get the firm in place gasket robot to go and reprogram it and do that 22 seconds? Check with the manufacturer, come up with a new program, have maintenance try it. We'll test it on a Saturday and see if it's good or not, with the idea that Monday we go live. So there's a lot of like hoshin-driven systematic Kaizen by good forward leadership that occurs. And what's my fourth? Fourth might be a value special project. The TSSC people equivalents, OMCD management might have a special Jishuken activity focus area where we're really going to try something new and extensive in this area this month, this quarter for a breakthrough, and repeatedly visit at a slower pace until you make some kind of incremental significant change in the entire flow or something of the area. So again, there's different flavors of Kaizen in Toyota, but it's all in all those cases, it's going beyond the existing standard and doing better.
Well, the thing that I've, I guess been learning a lot about myself from time with, guys like you and getting to go see places like Toyota and whatnot is, the extent to which the quote unquote management system kind of helps to kind of determine, define, and then like organize people to participate in those in all these various forms of problem solving, right? I mean, the Andon system itself, of course, is there to organize and propagate type 1 hour by hour charts, and daily monitoring are helping to recognize and then organize people to engage in type 2. And then, you just stated a couple of things, even just in passing, are like, a Jishuken activity, for example, and there's a management system in place that's sort of determining those things too. That's even there kind of governing those activities and bringing people together in ways that are both strategic, right? Like tied into hoshin, for example, and also focused on like people development. I mean, who's going to participate in those activities? They're going to be stretched and challenged. Mark, I'm thinking about a conversation you and I had at one time, and we alluded to it, touched upon it earlier when we were talking about this kind of provocative statement of 90+% problems are type 1. And you were saying that in your career, given the roles you had in your career at Toyota, given the roles that you had at Toyota, that probably for you, 80 to 90% of the kind of problem solving that you did was more in this like type 3 realm. And I remember in that conversation, we were talking about how, as you put it, Art, there's a lot of attention to that. There's a lot of like kind of interest and kind of energy that gets applied to that type 3, which can be problematic, especially when there isn't good type 1 and 2 happening, but also can be problematic when individuals who are engaging in that type 3 don't have themselves good experience with type 1 and type 2, and having learned those kind of fundamental problem solving skills and techniques that then can be put into service for good quality type 3 problem solving. Mark, maybe you could kind of elaborate a little bit on that, both in your experience and how the management system kind of supported you in some of that type 3 problem solving, but also what's been your experience both in your own work, career, and maybe in supporting folks out in the field with what is helpful to learn and experience in order to do good quality type 3 target condition Kaizen style problem solving.
I think it's a little bit true for type 2, but also with type 2 and type 3. I think there is this, I mean, I believe there's a huge spectrum of like problems that fall within that bucket. And I like what Art was speaking to, because a huge part of that spectrum is just what happens like on a daily basis in any job in Toyota. If you work in Toyota, I mean, Art was speaking specifically to the plant, but it's true in administration too. You're expected to kind of improve your job, and so those type of kaizens, kaizen of how you do your job and improving based on what just the standard you have in place, I think existed across the organization. Now, when I say there's a spectrum, those, that can include, and there's for each improvement to an individual job, it's type 3, but improvement to how the company, the type of vehicles the company markets, or excuse me, the type of vehicle the company develops and produces, is a big like corporate level problem that can be handled through that as well. one of the things we haven't talked about a lot about in this conversation that I wanted to bring up, and we often, we Toyota guys, Art, and I think Josh, you've hanging around with so many of us, like I think you're very similar. Is we don't like much to talk about culture because we often think because we really, in many respects, believe that we learn that through the work and through like people that like the development we've had while we've been in the organization. But there's a big component of this that not just we're talking a lot about the management system, but I believe that what was like a extremely important part of this was this culture. And I'm going to answer your question, Josh.
Okay.
Was the culture of the organization that like it's a responsibility of mine as a team member to improve my job or at whatever level I'm in. If you're up at a vice president level, it's your responsibility to improve that. But it's also like fulfilling for me to do that. It become like because you learn through Kaizen, through improving a standard, through setting a goal. It's a challenge and it's interesting and it becomes fulfilling for I think every level, different people at different levels in the organization. So to me, the answer to your question about like the exposure is, a lot of things that when I got to the level of like general assistant general manager too, I was expected to like think about bigger things. And but it was actually pretty motivating that knowing that I could put something together that usually often was on an A3 that would propose like a new system in the organization or a new structure or a new and if you're in engineering, it might be a new technology. I mean, those kind of things that the culture promoted that thinking that you could take any kind of like idea to. Now the organization might not accept everyone, but I mean, you were never told you were dumb because you did that. You were told like, okay, that's an interesting idea. Like, do more investigation on it. Or that's interesting, but maybe right now it can't be a priority. And so I think that culture is extremely important too.
I agree. And I just said we lack the framework to intelligently talk about culture.
Hmm.
Culture is invisible. It's like the air we breathe. Okay. How do you describe and talk about culture? We don't, because the tools aren't as specified. Like I think there probably are building blocks for culture if we stop and think about it. And I wouldn't use Toyota as an example. But just like there's tools for the Toyota production system, Toyota does some things that are very culturally similar. And I'm going to say somebody needs to look at a military, they could look at special forces, and I'm going to say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Toyota and a hospital or something. How do you, and the good ones, sports teams included, how do you develop a person in there and create what's always called culture? Winning organizations have good culture usually, right? Bad ones have bad culture. But I did martial arts, okay? Filipino martial art Kali for almost a decade, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 5 or 6 years before I stopped. One of the strongest cultures I ever experienced is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's got a little bit of Japanese flavor in it, but the Brazilian vibe to it. But you step in there, right? There's an attitude. You bow. You put on your gi. You learn to tie your belt. You line up by rank. And I'm not saying this is good, the hierarchical component, but you learn how to fit into a structure. And there's a person who's an expert who's going to share. They're often doing it for free. Like the owner makes the money. The person teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is often paid hourly or nothing, or they're earning their next belt promotion by teaching hours, for example.
Hmm.
I was with Checkmat, one of the top, outfits at the time, probably still is for learning Jiu-Jitsu. The people were phenomenally gifted at teaching, coaching, but there was a culture in that room. It's invisible, but how you step up, how you line up, how you tie your belt, you be on time, you're respectful, you learn the beginner moves, you learn how to be a good training partner, you learn how to warm up, okay? You learn how to do it safely. You realize they're not going to bust your arm. They're not trying to. They're going to safely teach you the basics. And you're going to learn the standard for like all these different positions and different moves. They're not documented. There's this in karate, they went down the kata path and trying to write stuff down, making a big deal out of that. The real thing about kata was how do we have one instructor teach 20 people at a time? We'll make the 20 do their movements in isolation by themselves versus air. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is always body on body. So you're learning by grappling. It's force versus force. And you learn that force doesn't work. You have to learn Judo and Jiu-Jitsu how to take advantage of your opponent's force and go in the opposite direction. And you can only learn that by feel. We make fun of kata just because you don't learn much versus air in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We do a little flow light grappling, but you learn by wrestling with somebody your size, bigger, smaller, around your ability, weaker, better. And you learn moves, you learn the standard attack, you learn the standard defense, you learn the counter, you learn to counter the counter, the counter. And the best guys on there in checkmat, they had this little logo, the black belts were five steps ahead. But thinking wise, they're playing chess. They're 5 steps ahead. I'm doing step one, trying to survive. And you learn that over years. It's a great look into a culture. And I'm thinking, how do we take who's the person to like look, oh, here's what bad military drill sergeants do. Here's what good special forces trainers do. Sports teams, hospital, jiu-jitsu, Toyota. What are the commonalities across that spectrum? And because the good ones have a culture. Man, there was this short of Toyota, the strongest culture I ever experienced in my life was Checkmat, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu house. Man, you behaved. You followed, you towed the line, respect for people. It was safe, and you practiced the art of getting better every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, guys. Well, we got kind of one more step to take on this little climb or journey that we're on, which is to get into this space of type 4, open-ended innovation, problem solving, and how lean management system. I think primarily we're going to be connecting it with hoshin kanri, but how that kind of supports, organizes, enables that kind of problem solving. So like we've done, Art, maybe we can start with you just to kind of clarify again what type 4 is and how you see a management system at Toyota, or just a general lean management system enabling and facilitating that kind of problem solving.
So again, there's always overlap between these. I put them in 4 categories, but there is overlap. 1 and 2 have some overlap. 2 and 3 have some overlap. 3 and 4 have some overlap. You can argue where Kaizen ends and true breakthrough, new thinking begins, obviously. But type 4, I mean, the stereotypical examples are completely something and totally new. So the Prius development, the Lexus development, big developments, reorganizing the dealer structure, things like that were often, type 4 innovative breakthroughs, part of a hoshin or not part of a hoshin. I'm just going to put that whole debate aside for a second. But you have interesting breakthroughs in time because maybe it's society forcing something on you to get out of internal combustion engines and develop new forms of engine and battery technology. Okay. Other times that the marketplace changes and you see an opportunity. And sometimes it's select people at the top tend to get involved in those, but I'm going to argue there is a type 4, which is it's beyond Kaizen. It's a breakthrough that can be bottom up from the workers too. Example, I've used it in the book and time again. I went to Virginia. The general manager was my former boss, Mitch Kawai, and he said, I got to show you something, and you're going to like shake your head when you see it. The old way to wash cylinder heads is putting it through a washing machine, 4 sides, blast it with nozzles, and it was always no fun to work on and difficult. And a maintenance gentleman one day, literally in the shower, had the idea that the blasting nozzles inward was the wrong concept. So he inverted the thinking. How do you flow it out or agitate the particles so they'll flow out? And he thought, well, you pick up the cylinder block with a robotic hand, you dunk it in a tank, in a steel barrel, move it to the next barrel, move to the next barrel. And I bet you if you do that 3 times, it's more efficient, cheaper, and better than the old style, big industrial washer machines. And they did as an experiment. It was 100% better. I mean, it got for aluminum cylinder head parts, okay, because those are sticky little chips. And for one process in particular, not all processes, that was deemed superior. Energy costs, space, floor, efficiency, reprogrammability, cost, everything, it knocked it out. And Mitch was right. I saw that and my legs literally buckled. And I thought, God, were we so stupid all those years? But it was groupthink. It was like in the box groupthink. Americans, Germans, Japanese, everybody went down the same path. And then one guy had a breakthrough thought one day that revolutionized the thought process of how you wash things. And that's what the Stanford design school and its breakthrough thinking is kind of like about empathizing. That started with empathy. I hate to clean these nozzles. I hate to crawl in the machine. I hate for my brothers and colleagues and sisters and I to go in there and have to do this. What's the problem? We're clearing ships by blasting them inwards. How do you reverse it? What's the opposite? How do you flow them out? And he invented a new washer cycle that for that process worked really well.
Yeah.
We had one by accident overseas. It's kind of like the Porter documentation case. Machine tools have a PLC, programmable logic controller, that we all learn to program and operate. And your program is about 100 pages of paper. Problem is when you do that overseas, like reprinting that paper, updating the circuits, reprinting that paper is a nightmare. So we need to develop a CAD system, an SCAD, electrical SCAD, sequence CAD, not an AutoCAD for mechanical thing, drafting. We had to develop a CCAD, a sequence CAD. We got some budget. We found a vendor. We came up with a prototype. We tried it, made an English version, a Japanese version. And it grew into a company outside of Toyota, like an idea that my boss had to fix a little local problem in Kentucky wound up being a multi-million-dollar little, cash cow for some companies in Japan on the periphery, helping Toyota solve a problem.
Nice. So, Mark, what might you help us with here in both sort of elucidating type 4 problem solving and connecting that into management system? Besides what I guess your answer could just be read the book, perhaps, but
book. No. Well, it is yeah, I want to say read the book because a primary like message in the book is that this thinking around hoshin kanri is both innovation comes from the bottom and because it comes from the work. And so it's both the top down and bottom up. Like I think, you hear that, what companies that I visit and talk about strategy and what should we do moving forward as a company tend to think of this as something that some select group of people decide at the top and deploy into the organization. That's why I don't like that word, strategy deployment. So I do, and there's some examples actually in the book of the types of things Art's talking about. The case study in the book is about a lawnmower manufacturing company, and some of the they have to develop an electric mower, and they're struggling to do that. So through some innovations that occur in engineering and production, they're able to kind of get some breakthrough thinking. So I think the connection point is that to a certain extent, organizations, I believe, have to kind of decide what direction they're going to go on. And of course, you want to understand the current state of the company and what issues you're resolving. But you got to, you're in most, like Toyota in the automotive industry, it's a very competitive industry, and many industries are like that. So you need to understand your industry. So because that kind of determines to some extent, it's a little bit different from Kaizen in that respect. It kind of determines like the pace of change you have to make. You can improve every day as much as you want, but if you're only going half the speed of Hyundai or in the automotive industry or Ford or whatever, and you'll lose. So you need to understand the marketplace, the environment, like Art was speaking to, like, are we going to be with internal combustion engines going forward or not? All of those inputs are important to determine the type of innovation the organization needs. And I think that's really important. But Toyota is the type of company, and I think I know there are other companies in other industries like this too. That the innovation came from, I mean, start with Taiichi Ohno, one of the most innovative people that ever came out of the manufacturing industry.
Yeah.
He didn't like make a big plan with the president and decide what the company was going to do. He, in his machine shop, he was responsible. He made some revolutionary changes based on his thinking. And that Toyota happened to be an organization that wanted to cultivate that type of thinking. So I think there's a lot of good organizations out there that have those type of people and
Yeah.
we just need a mechanism to be cultivating that type of thinking in organization. And I think hoshin can help you do that if you do it well.
The phrase in Japanese, the nail that sticks up will get hammered down, because their culture is conformist and it's tough to be innovative. A legitimate knock on the Japanese in many industries is there's not a lot of innovation. Sony, Honda, Toyota, a lot of these companies are abnormal examples. Okay, this is not universal in Toyota. Researchers often leave Japan because they know they'll have a better chance of getting a Nobel Prize or a breakthrough by working in an American laboratory type environment than they would in Japan. So, culture cuts both ways in this debate. But I think there are founder innovations where it does take some force of will for the big breakthroughs. Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Ono, pushing through the Lexus division. I don't know if it's true anymore. Mark might know better. I don't follow anymore. Lexus division was 60, 70, 80% of Toyota's profits in its heydays, its glory days. That was due, and that whole Lexus concept was pushed through, force of personality, a lot behind the scenes by AG Toyota. There was resistance, organized resistance, if we could or should do that. Was it beneficial? Was it our niche? We're Corolla Camry. We're not a Lexus. Today, it's laughable. It was not accepted common wisdom that Lexus would succeed or was a good strategic move for Toyota back in the day. There were plenty of naysayers. So sometimes you do need like the Elon Musk type of like founder vision to innovate. But then, as Mark says, like I always want to put myself in contrast of tension between the opposites. There's analyze the work and innovate, and there's somebody who's going to come up with the new widget. We're going to go from horse and buggy to the car. We're going to go to the reusable space rocket. We're going to the hybrid engine. There's types of innovation, but the company culture has to again reward that, and it's not an automatic that the Japanese culture does, for example. Like that culture has to be built. That mindset, behavior, and culture does have to be built and enabled, and that lives in the space between our ears, our self-talk, and what our boss says to us, and our boss's boss says to him, and all the way up and down the chain. And that's like the human power to problem solve and innovate, to me, is the most beautiful thing we have. That's like the Marvel movies have kind of like fallen out of favor, but our superpower is our brains. The ability to troubleshoot, problem solve, Kaizen, and innovate. It's a wonderful gift we have. And, there's flavors of it. There's not just one type, and multiple enablers within the culture, the mindset, the thinking's behavior's got to point in the right direction. We lack the framework to talk about that effectively yet, I think. But the pieces, terms, okay, but it's not framework, roadwork, steps, how to change behavior of top management. That's, nobody's solved that puzzle. And just saying, go do scientific thinking. I'm sorry. I work in a scientific laboratory for 20 years now. They struggle with lean thinking and doing improvement, even though they're all scientists. That's why I know that just saying scientific method is not enough. It takes more than that. In fact, their culture was one we had to overcome significantly, because it was like dominated by a few people and only one way of thinking. And I would say a cultural did shift in the national laboratory I worked with over a 15-year period, but it was pushing the entire time.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been really, really great conversation. I'm thrilled and feel very personally privileged to be a part of this conversation with you two. I mean, to tap into your collective years of experience, both inside Toyota and then, drawing from those lessons outside with other organizations. I do think there's, as Mark and I experienced just a couple of weeks ago, there's tremendous interest and kind of appetite for more about sort of this connection between problem solving and ways of organizing people through management systems to do effective problem solving. And as you've so well described for us, Art, in your book, not all problem solving is the same. And yet oftentimes that's kind of what we tend to see. So anyway, thank you so much. Hopefully, I guess I'm kind of standing in here as a proxy for the listener. And I hope that they enjoy getting to hear from your experience and your thinking as much as I did today. You got a closing thought there, Art?
Yeah, again, just feedback, like however LEI can possibly connect. I took notes. Things like this make me talk. Interacting with Mark and you actually make me think about, okay, this is how I think about, okay, how I should explain things better for different circumstances and situations. Like, so the flavors, like 4 types of type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, that's maybe worthy of exploration and drafting out some more thought
Totally
on.
agree.
The interconnected space, the whole point of daily management, problem solving, hoshin leadership, fundamentally interconnected, and culture, the glue that holds all the invisible bonding of the electrons, like that holds it all together, right? The strong force, the weak force, gravity, electromagnetic force, it's invisible. You can't deny it though, it's there. In cultures like that in lean, we got to figure out the right way to talk about the invisible physics of lean.
Sure.
And that would be exciting to do somehow, the right group, the right setting somehow to.
Yeah.
I think that would be a breakthrough in lean thinking if we could come up with
I think
better
so
ways
too.
of doing that.
I think so too.